Good morning, Year 12, and welcome to a Thursday lesson this week. We have, of course, a bank holiday tomorrow, but let's be honest, the amount of work that you're going to be doing is going to be slightly less from home, so I still wanted to do another poem. I hope you don't mind, so we can continue to journey our way through songs of innocence and experience. So we are taking today page 69, On Another Sorrow. And this is, of course, a song of innocence. Now, this is to be honest, a strangely long poem. And I use the adverb strangely because, of course, so many from Blake's collection are relatively small, relatively unassuming, but despite their deceivingly small size, they often harbour quite a huge message. This one has a strong message too, but there is a lot more detail to discover. So, the artwork that accompanies this image on the right-hand side doesn't give too much away, to be honest. So I'm not going to discuss that in great detail today, but it's just there for reference. If you think of anything, if you notice anything after we've read the poem, please pop it in the comments below, because I'd be really interested to see if you can notice anything within there that is symbolic. I can notice one thing, but I want to see if you notice it. Anyway, On Another Sorrow, have a little go at this first before I say anything. I want you to think of this question. Is it possible for us as individuals, as us as human beings, as sentient beings with consciousness and conscience, is it possible to be unmoved by another person's sorrow? By their sadness? What might then stop or hinder someone from exhibiting, from showing pity for someone else? Could you do a little quick creative mind map, a quick list for me, if not, of whether you feel it is possible, number one, of failing to harbour pity or sorrow for someone else's problems, and if it is, what might stop someone then from feeling that way? Give yourself 2 minutes, pause the video, off we go. Okay, I'm not going to say too much about this. I just wanted you to consider this and the world that you believe we may well live in. It's true, of course, that within Blake's contemporary world, and with London at its epicentre, during the influx of industry, during the late 18th century, the late 18th century and the early 19th century, there is this idea that there is so much industry transpiring that many individuals are not counted as such anymore. They are just cogs in the machine of this capitalistic era. So it's quite clear, of course, that Blake felt that people needed more compassion. They needed to exhibit pity for someone else, but not just passive pity, right? Because it's no good in just looking at one's sorrow, another person's sorrow, and going, oh, what a shame, how unfortunate, and then failing to act upon that injustice, and failing to remedy that person's plight. So of course that is something that Blake, I would assume, would be seeking to communicate within this poem. After all, it is titled On Another's Sorrow. So by definition, we're looking at the plight of someone else that isn't us. We are seeking to empathise, to not be this self-centred, egocentric being, and to live in a world, where we can exhibit action, and do things to remedy. Hopefully I haven't waffled on for too long with that, but you need to look at the title, you need to look at what it evokes as a first point. So let's read the poem, because again, there's just no point in me going into this analysis without seeing what's going on. So here we go. Can I see another's woe and not be in sorrow too? Can I see another's grief and not seek for kind relief? Can I see a falling tear and not feel my sorrow's share? Can a father see his child weep, nor be with sorrow filled? Can a mother sit and hear an infant groan, an infant fear? No, no, never can it be. Never, never can it be? And can he, and I haven't made an error there with the capitalisation, that means God, who smiles on all, hear the wren with sorrows small, hear the small bird's grief and care, hear the woes that infants bear, and not sit beside the nest, pouring pity in their breast, and not sit the cradle near, weeping tear on infant's tear, and not sit both night and day, wiping all our tears away. Oh no, never can it be, never, never can it be. He doth give his joy to all. He becomes an infant small. He becomes a man of woe. He doth feel the sorrow too. Think not thou canst sigh a sigh, and thy Maker is not by. Think not thou canst weep a tear, and thy Maker is not near. Oh, he gives to us his joy, that our grief he may destroy. Till our grief is fled and gone, he doth sit by us and moan. Okay, so on the surface, and I'm sure you're already thinking this as I was reading this to you, this clearly has its roots once again in Blake's perception of the creator, of God. Now we know there existed within the contrary state of affairs two antithetical visions of the creator. So we have the innocent perspective of the creator, which is our all benevolent God, okay, who heaps pity upon the breast of those who suffer, okay, who shows great love at the heart of his being, but is made thus vulnerable, okay, due to this open nature. And then on the other end of our antithetical scale, we have the experience version of the creator, which is of course the thou shalt not high and mighty go in the sky, full of malevolence and judgment, okay, breeding shame. Now, of course, this is the fallen perspective of the creator, and it doesn't seem to be what we have here. What we have in this poem, and I'm sure you've guessed it by now, drum roll please, is an innocent, childlike, poetic voice who views the creator as a benevolent, omnibenevolent being. Okay? Now, this innocent perspective seems to mirror that behaviour, because they open the poem by saying, can I see another person's woe, their sadness, right, and not be in sorrow too, and not feel, not mirror that sadness, not have great empathy? Can I see their grief and not seek some kind relief for them, right, not help them, not aid them? Can I see a falling tear and not feel my sorrow share? That's empathy, right? And then can a father not see his child weep and not be filled with sorrow? Okay, can a mother as well not hear that infant groan? Nice little reference there, guys, intertextual reference to a cradle song, okay, and not feel sadness for that child too. Now, the start of the poem is quite irregular, and then it seems to break up the rhyme pattern, okay, in the third stanza with the double negation, well, the triple negation in the third line of stanza 3. No, no, never can it be. Never, never can it be. Okay, so that moment is where the regular rhythm is disrupted by those spondees. No, no. Shows the force of rejection here. The innocent poetic voice cannot even bear to think of a being, an individual or a creator that cannot display great pity and empathy for the individual suffering. Okay, they feel this force of energy. They're rejecting the idea there to show the completeness of their argument. But it's not a complete argument. It is not a complete argument. This depiction of, the creator and of an individual that mirrors these omnibenevolent ideas is limited and thus false. There was not that many in Blake's world that, harboured this generous spirit. Because if there were, there wouldn't be such oppression. There wouldn't be such poverty. There wouldn't be chartered streets There wouldn't be blood that runs down palace walls with an indifferent monarchy sending soldiers to their deaths for senseless wars. There wouldn't be nurses, quasi-parental figures who deny their charges innocence and creative imagination. This depiction here in On Another Sorrow is limited and thus blinkered. Okay? It doesn't recognise society's failures, the failures of human life. And God too is this so-called figure full of benevolence. But it quite literally says, look at the bottom stanza on the left-hand side, that he who smiles on all, apparently, he smiles on all, yeah? Everyone receives his love. What about the little black boy? Okay? What about the chimney sweep? What about the young harlot? Did they receive he who smiles on all? No. But apparently this God sits beside the nest, pouring pity in their breast. Okay? And apparently on the second half there, he doth give his joy to all. This poetic voice fails to perceive the woe in human life. This is a very similar trend to all of the songs of innocence, but it doesn't mean, Year 12, and I've been quite critical already, that this poem doesn't have its models for joy. Okay? It has, like every innocent poem, models for change and joy, but it also has warnings for the excess of innocence. Okay, so let me sum this up then, some potential meanings. In fact, let's take a pause. You're going to pause this video right now. I want you to sum up in 2 sentences from what I've just communicated, and I've communicated an awful lot, what you think this poem's about. 2 sentences, pause the video, go. Okay, yes, welcome back. I will tell you what critics have read this poem as, but hopefully you have some idea already, take some ownership. So the most obvious meaning of this poem is that God, via this innocent lens, is this benevolent being, one who is perceived to care for all of his creation, to empathise with all of humankind, including animals, by the way, and because of that he makes suffering endurable. Okay, because God's love is near, God's love is always near. So you might well be suffering, but God's love is constant. But, and this is a limitation to this innocent perspective, the God here, the benevolent creator, cannot remove their suffering. Because look at the last line. He doth sit by us and moan. He literally sits, and sit is always this vision of passivity, okay? He cannot remedy. Ironically, he can't destroy the grief, even though it says it on the third from bottom line. What they mean there is that we can, deal with our griefs because of his love. But in reality, he can't destroy it, okay? Not this benevolent God here. Remember that idea I gave before, that God, a Christian in his own way, spiritual in his own way too, he believed that God actually was amongst mankind. Okay, so not a guy in the clouds, not a meek and mild shepherd, but actually we are all godly. Okay, God is amongst us. So he quite likes the idea of God amongst man. So he does invite the readers to consider that, to consider the divine being that can be found within us all rather than externally. And he says that in the third from bottom stanza when he says, he becomes an infant small, he becomes a man of woe, he doth feel the sorrow too. So that I like. He's suggesting there very subtly that God should not be this external ruler, this external divinity, but actually a figure amongst men. We are all godly. What have I got next? What did I say? Yes, a more subtle reading is that maybe we've got this idea that everyone needs faith in God since he sees and understands their hardship. So I don't think he's rallying against belief in God at all here. I think belief is powerful and it can remedy some grief and sadness by having hope. And that's not the evil here. That's not the evil here. Okay, he's not against that. And if we take a non-religious sort of view of this poem, it's quite simply about being kind, you know? It's about we as humans should have compassion for others. We should try to ease other people's burdens, but by taking action, to help, and not just to provide empty words of support. He does that through what's not said in the poem. It's not about sitting by with us and moaning, not sharing in grief, but actually helping to remedy it. Okay, a lot of people have criticised the clapping for the NHS on Thursday nights at 8:15 because they feel whilst it is a show of sort of unity, it's actually fairly passive as an act. You know, what you should be doing is voting for the correct party that supports the NHS and doesn't seek to privatise it. What you should be doing is donating to, causes, but also remembering that the NHS isn't a charity and shouldn't be, and that's the government's failure. Doing things, start a petition, okay? Use your voice, vote. That's how we make change and remedy. And that's part of this protest poem. It's about really taking action, than just, using religion as a means of enforcing passivity. The importance of pity. Yes, for a productive society, but pity with action. In this poem, unfortunately, God is considered a superior being, but this overflowing pity that he has is something we can all learn from. Okay, if you didn't get all that, you might want to pause, go back, listen again and summarize it. It's probably no good just copying out these bullet points. They need to be in your own words. You need to get it, right? You need to get it. So some structural stuff. I don't want to go on about this too much. The video will become too long, but the poem is composed of quatrains, stanzas of 4 lines. Why? I'm asking you. I'm not going to tell you. Can you write down why you think? Why quatrains? Why this very neat, ordered structural choice? What could that mirror or reflect? I will tell you the rhyme scheme though. It's A, B, C, C. So woe, 2, and then grief relief, A, B, C, C. You've got the rhyming couplet at the end of the line. You have that again in stanza 2, but then it's disrupted with the spondee in stanza 3. No. And I think the disruption there is quite key because it shows the childlike enthusiasm for their ideas. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just unfortunate that their ideas are a little bit limited and misguided and naive. Okay. The poem is filled with repetitions, lots of reiteration of sorrow, woe. I guess that could be Blake covertly suggesting that society is riddled with it and thus we need remedy. And then, of course, the poetic voice does share some similar views to Blake. The idea of, God being amongst mankind, that need for greater pity. But, of course, there is the difference in that the poetic voice makes itself vulnerable in its inability to recognise society's failures. Okay? Pause it if you need to. Those are my structural ideas. You do need them. Structure is key for AO2. There's obviously rhetorical interrogatives too. I'm not going to read it. It's there. Okay, imagery then and its impact in the poem. Poem, of course, represents this idealistic view of God and the Creator. So there's lots of, Christian religious allusion within the poem. We have, unfortunately, this is what I wanted to say with this one. Whilst we have lots of childlike imagery, even the small bird is indicative of the small vulnerable child. Ultimately, year 12, the child's emotions are kind of suppressed and silenced by the end, because we have this idea that, God can just destroy our griefs and he sits by us and moans and that's it, right? There's no proactive activity. The child has his understanding of the sorrow in the world, but that understanding doesn't move beyond just understanding it. There's no actions or deeds. The strong maternal nature from the parental figures in the poem. So we have imagery of parental rule again. In this case, it's a bit like the nurse from Innocence. the parents understand and sense the infant's sorrow, but don't do anything to remedy it. Okay, so you've got that as well. So the last thing is context for me, for information carrying on here. And we know this, the keyest part, guys, is in that first bit. Blake believed that the church as an institution and God and his belief in spirituality were two very separate things. The church was political and God was not. Okay, so it's the Church of England's failure in his contemporary world, to actually, deeds, not words, to do things to remedy society. So this whole poem, in a roundabout way, is a critique of organised religion. Okay, so that's really key. So our big question for this lesson, you're going to spend about 15 minutes answering this in your exercise books, please. And I would love to see, to be honest, some of these paragraphs, just to check in with you and make sure that you've understood this poem. This is probably one of our trickier ones, so do type this email up and send it to me just for a quick check through so I know that you're okay. So how does Blake manage to create models for change in the poem, despite presenting a naive perspective on the creator? This is quite a tough little question. Let me just reiterate what I'm asking you here. Even though this poem presents a limited perspective on the creator and humankind, it does still within it have a couple of positive instances and models for positive change in society. Okay, despite there's a new word, despite its limited perspective on the creator. Okay, so what are those little shining positive messages that come through? Okay, innocence is not all bad. Okay, we know it has its positive qualities. What are they here? What are the models for change? Okay, I would plan a creative mind map around here, highlighting your keywords in the question and, thinking about your key moments and quotes, and then create that into an analytical paragraph for me. Okay, sent by email, please, as soon as possible for some feedback. Thank you very much, guys. Enjoy the long weekend. See you soon.